In this module, I'm going to give you a quick sort of demonstration of what SAS looks like and how you can import data into SAS. So unlike Jump, it's not really straightforward to create data sets on your own in a spreadsheet format. Instead, you have to use something called the data step, which requires a lot of programming and background. In fact, there's whole courses just on how to use the data step. So instead, I'm just going to focus on showing you how you can import data into SAS using proc import. But before we do that, I first wanted to say that you cannot use the main SAS program if you have a Mac. It's a Windows platform. There is something called SAS University Edition, which is a run on your on any browser. It is a little bit more complicated to install, and so if you have a Mac and you want to run SAS on your own computer, you'll need to see me to get some information on how to install that. Otherwise, I recommend you try to go to one of the computer labs somewhere on campus. All of them should be equipped with SAS. Um, so first, let's just kind of see what or how SAS looks when you open it up. University Edition doesn't quite look like this, but there are a lot of similarities. So on the left, you have these four different options for the Explorer. And so all of your data sets, when you bring them in correctly, are going to be located in libraries. So you're going to want to double click on this to open the libraries up. And the way I'm going to show you how to save data sets, they're always going to be in your work folder or work library. So then you double click on the work library. So I've already imported a data set in here called Trout, and we're going to do that again, but this is where this is going to be. Now you need to keep in mind that when things are saved in the work library, when you close SAS, they are no longer going to be in there again. So you'd have to run this proc import step right here to get the data set in one more time. Another window that pops up is the output window. So whenever we run a procedure like proc mixed or something like that, not really for proc import, the output will be shown either in this output window or an additional results window that'll show up later on. It's not shown up by default. You'll also have a blank program window right here that'll just be kind of untitled. But I've brought in a SAS file and we'll be working with writing code in here to do the analysis that we want. So once you run a piece of code, you have this log which tells you whether that code ran successfully or not. And I'll show you what happens if something runs unsuccessfully to tell you whether you did something right or wrong. So I'm going to try to bring in that CSV trout experiment data file. And so for me to do that with SAS, I'm going to use proc import, so I'm actually going to use the code. So this is available on the Moodle site. So all you need to do is modify inside these quotes here where on your computer that file is located. You also need to provide a name for that file when it's going to be stored in the work library. So I called it Trout, so we'll call this one Trout again. And so now I just need to say where my file is located. So my file is located on a very long directory, so I'm going to have to type this all out. So it's in my S drive, in my documents folder, in my teaching folder inside of that, in 2016 fall, and then stat 711, assignments, actually not assignments, data, lecture 4, and then trout experiment.csv. So that is a mouthful, and I had to remember all of that. So hopefully it works out. If it doesn't, we'll notice that it doesn't in the log. So in order to run this piece of code, there's two things I can do. I could either just put my cursor anywhere in here, and then I can hit this little running man right here for submit that will run it. Now, if you have a long piece of code with multiple procedures and you only want to run one at a time, what you can do is you can highlight the piece of code that you want to run and then hit the submit button. So this is a good habit to get into because usually you don't want to run all of your pieces of code at one time. So I'm going to highlight it and hit run. And so I get a little error message. It says import canceled, output dataset Trout already exists. Specify the replace option to overwrite it. So this will happen if you try to write something over So let me add this little replace option right here. I believe it goes right there. Let me try to run this piece of code. And so yes, it did run this time. So here it says the work trout dataset was successfully created. The dataset work.trout has 40 observations and 2 variables. So if I want to see if my dataset actually opened up correctly, I'm just going to double click on it right here and it'll open this up. And I can check this and it looks like it ran and brought in the data the correct way. This is exactly how the CSV file looks, so I'm fairly confident that it worked. You will notice that these names though are a little off. They have a lot of underscores, and that's because SAS has certain rules about what you can name your variables. So here, if I right click and I go to column attributes, I can get a good idea of what this actually is. Looks like it has 2 underscores and then a G, then another underscore. So if I'm ever going to reference these variables, I have to keep this sort of naming. And I'll show you how you can change that in just a second. So let's see what happens if I had an error, and this I'm sure is going to happen the first couple of times you use this. So let's say instead of it being troutexperiment.csv, what if I just called it trout? So technically, this file does not exist on my computer. And so I'm going to highlight and click run. And then I get this error message. SAS system stop processing because of errors. Import unsuccessful. Physical file does not exist. So whenever it says the physical file does not exist and you know it exists, it's always you type something wrong in the data file. So, and that's exactly what happened here. I didn't type it right. I will say also that I kind of glossed over this, but I'm going to be sending you primarily CSV documents just so you can use this proc import code by itself. But if you ever get another type of document like an Excel file with has .xls, you would just need to change this dbms, which is telling SAS how your data are delimited in your file. So let's look at how we can actually rename the variables in our trout data set. So for me to do that, I need to run this again because I overwrote it and was missing. So there it is, it's back again. So if I want to overwrite these variables right here, so I'll just call this I'll just call it sulf and this one Y. I need to tell SAS how to do that. So the way I'm going to be able to do this is with a data step. So the data step starts by you saying data, and then you say the name of the data set that you want to create. So I want to actually just overwrite trout. And so I'm going to just say trout. So I'm going to overwrite this trout with a new trout data set. And then I always put a semicolon after it. You need to make sure that you do that. Then I need to tell SAS what data set to bring in. So I'm going to say set, and I'm going to say trout again, because I'm going to bring that one in and modify it. So the next thing I'm going to do is use the rename statement. So this is how I rename a variable. So the way this works is you type in the name of the old variable and then you tell SAS what the new variable name is going to be. So I need to bring this up so I can remember how these old variables are, what they're called. So this is sulfomerazine underscore 100 pound fish. And I'm going to say this is equal to sulf. And then I'm not going to put a semicolon here because I need to put one more rename. I need to say hemoglobin underscore underscore G underscore 100 ml underscore equals, and I'm just going to call this Y. And then I put my semicolon. So after I'm done with this, I'm done with all I want to do with the data step. I'm going to type run and then do another semicolon. You don't have to put these in all caps. In fact, SAS is pretty much case insensitive. I just set up my code this way to make it easier to see what I'm doing. So I usually start statement names like data, set, and rename in all caps just to make it a little bit clear. So I'm going to highlight this and click run. And so now it says there were 40 observations, red, so it looks like everything worked out. Let me double click on this, and we can see that the variable names have been changed. So that's pretty much all I'm going to go over right here. There's a ton more data step options that we could look at, but for right now, I'm not going to worry about it. So you're not overloaded with a lot of SAS information. So you'll get some experience with SAS, but not too much, just enough to be able to do some simple models for data sets that are nicely structured already.